Good morning. Welcome to the Ethical Humanist Society. My name is Bobby Jacob, and I'll be moderating today's program, Chicago's Fabulous Fountains by Greg Borzo. Today's platform is virtual, as you can see. Out of concern for everyone, the EHS has discontinued in-person gatherings. When the time is right, in-person gatherings will return. After the presentation concludes today, the chat box will be opened up for question submission for the Q&A portion. I'll start out today's program with a quote that helps define what humanism means to us as members of the Ethical Humanist Society. Religion, however impervious to logic, has a deep source. It dramatizes the vital turning points of life and celebrates the rites of passage, birth, marriage, and death. Simply to reject the deeply entrenched faith of our fathers, institutionalized by the church and sanctified by custom and tradition, is not enough, unless and until one makes the attempt to provide new symbols of meaning and purpose. Thus, non-theists of whatever variety may seek to enlighten the converted and attempt to set them on a new path, but they will not succeed simply by destroying the old faiths and symbols, for new ones, perhaps more appealing, will replace them. It is necessary to substitute moral equivalence. It is necessary to answer the key questions we have always asked. Where did we come from? Where are we going? Can life be meaningful? Is it bearable? How do we face adversity and death? Where do we get the courage to be and to become? These are all deeply felt existential questions, not idle speculative exercises. Almost everyone asks them at some point in life. And that is Paul Kurtz in defense of secular humanism. At the EHS, our programs address a wide variety of topics, including current events, philosophy, arts and sciences, to name just a few. Today's presentation is part of our ongoing programming relating to Chicago. Today's speaker is Greg Borzo. Greg is an award-winning journalist, author, former media manager for scientific affairs at the Field Museum, University of Chicago news officer, Chicago History Museum volunteer tour guide, avid bicyclist, and superb past presenter at the Ethical Humanist Society of Chicago. A few of his many book titles are Lost Restaurants of Chicago, The Chicago L, and Chicago Cable Cars. Please welcome Greg Borzo.
Good morning. Glad to be with you. Thank you for that very warm introduction. Actually, I'm kind of relieved that I'm able to present today. I've been feeling a little sick lately. Don't worry, it's not COVID, but I did have to go to the doctor. And right away she said, "Oh, you got fountain fever." And she said I could give this presentation anyway, even though fountain fever is very, very contagious. So that's another reason I'm doing this in a virtual format. And actually, by the time we're done today, I hope all of you also have fountain fever. So let's go ahead and jump in with the program. Could you put the slides up? Are we good? Fountains everywhere. Why fountains? Fountains are beautiful. Fountains are inspiring. They help us relax. They help us appreciate the built environment. This is especially true in Chicago with all the concrete and steel that we're surrounded by. These fountains help us to take off the hard edges of the city. Why fountains? Well, our works and our surroundings either corrupt or refine our souls. And I would maintain that our fountains, beautiful, inspiring fountains such as these, refine our souls and address some of those very issues that were brought up in the definition of ethical humanism that we just heard. So, as a writer, as a journalist, and even I'm sure all of you as high school students in English Lit, heard this advice: write what you know. Well, I think that's good advice, but I prefer the corollary. write what you want to know. And I always was drawn to fountains. I always found them beautiful and inspiring. And so I wanted to know more about them. How do they come to be? What do they represent? How do they move us? So as I traveled across the country, I spent more and more attention on fountains. Everywhere I went, from New York City here to San Francisco and across the country, I discovered some fabulous fountains, and I got to love fountains more and more and more. So I decided to do a book about fountains. So I took a tour across the country. Great, all expenses trip paid, you know, a good way to go. And so I thought I would take you very quickly on some of the highlights of this tour. We're going to look at a few fountains, and then we'll review those very same fountains. So for the tour, let's go very quickly through a number of fountains as I crisscross the country. So fasten your seatbelts. These fountains, as you see, are tremendously different. A lot of art, architecture, a lot of thought, a lot of money went into creating these fountains. And some of them are very powerful. They move us in very, very different ways. They speak to us. So I promised we'd review those fountains. And again, pretty quickly, we'll look through them. But I have to tell you right off the bat, I just played a trick on you. Every other fountain that I showed you in that little tour was in Chicago. So let's go. Prometheus, of course, at Rockefeller Center in New York. This is at the Fourth Presbyterian Church, even though this courtyard setting makes it look like you're in some kind of medieval French monastery. But I'm going to prove to you that we're right on Michigan Avenue, Fourth Presbyterian Church, right across the street from all the tourists and the buses and the hubbub of Michigan Avenue. So look at the top of this fountain, and you'll see, shot in the daylight, with the Hancock Tower in the background. Back on tour, the Bellagio fountain in Vegas, and back in Chicago. This is Printer's Row fountain on Dearborn, and the neighbors love it. It's a prize gem. It's a gem of the Printer's Row neighborhood, and of course it's the centerpiece, the gathering spot for Litfest, Printer's Row Litfest every year. Back on tour, no explanation needed there. Back in Chicago, this is the Board of Trade fountain, right next to the Board of Trade building. And it reflects a lot of the beautiful Art Deco elements of the Board of Trade building. Back on tour, Union Station in St. Louis. Back in Chicago, Legion Park. Amazing fountain here at the intersection of Lincoln and Peterson, two enormously busy streets. Most people are going by 40 miles an hour and they don't even know there's a fountain there, and yet it's extremely beautiful, especially surrounded by all these flowering trees in the spring. Back on tour, this is the Forsyth fountain in Savannah. And in Chicago, this is Crane Girl, one of four beautiful small fountains that are dotted around Buckingham Fountain. Oh, about, I don't know, 50 yards away from Buckingham Fountain. And people don't notice these because they're, of course, focused on Buckingham. But these are beautifully done. Leonard Prunell sculpted these fountains. And with Crane Girl, you have the Turtle Boy and Dove Girl. And they're very cute, charming fountains that kind of dribble away in a very quiet, peaceful way. Back on tour, Firefighters Monument in Kansas City, Missouri. Back in Chicago, this is at the McCormick Center. We're looking out at the lake across the bike and walking path. This is an enormous fountain that splashes people who go by. Very loud, enormous fountain. And in New York City, back on tour, this, of course, is the 9/11 Memorial site. And this fountain is enormous. You can see the people that rim the top of the fountain, how tiny they look. That gives you perspective on the size of this fountain. It's actually a double fountain with the water cascading down deep into the hole left by that tragedy. Here back in Chicago, there are several fountains, 6 around the Aon Center, right there on Randolph and Michigan. And so this is looking southeast, and above there you see the sidewalk. That is actually Randolph Street. People walk by and they don't even notice this loud, vigorous fountain pouring water down on both sides of this central entranceway. You almost think you're up in the Wisconsin Dells or something. There's so much water flowing and so much energy here. And yet people have never even noticed or heard of this fountain. And it's one of several there at the base of the Aon building. So that's our tour. So guess what happened along the way as I crisscrossed the country? You might say a funny thing happened on the way to the fountains. I decided instead of doing a book about the fountains of the US, it would be a book about the fountains of Chicago. And working on that, I discovered that in Chicago, we have more than 135 outdoor public fountains in the city, not even counting the suburbs. So you can go visit these fountains, no line, no wait. Of course, this has been a bad year. The fountains have, by and large, been turned off. But next spring, I hope you're all out there looking to discover some of this art and beauty sprinkled throughout the city. So Chicago is, of course, known for museums, skyscrapers, architecture, and performing arts. But I'm on a mission to get everyone to know of the fountains of Chicago. I want everybody to have fountain fever. It's high time to shine a light on our fountains. So let's take each of these 4 categories quickly and compare them to fountains. So Chicago, of course, is known for its world-class museums. MSI, Field, whatever, History Museum. But I would like to draw attention to its outdoor fountain museum. Yes, many of the fountains that are outdoors are of, quote, museum quality. They're done by famous artists such as Laredo Taft's The Fountain of Time down on the Midway and near U of C. And it's a very precious piece of art. Many of Taft's pieces are in museums. In fact, I kind of wish this one was, because it's disintegrating due to the weather and to pollution. Close up of that fountain. I would encourage all of you to get out and visit these fountains, out to this outdoor public fountain museum. It's free, by the way. Here's another example of museum quality work that you can find in the outdoor public fountains. This is San Marco II. The horse on top of this fountain was sculpted by Ludovico di Luigi. He's a very accomplished abstract artist in Italy, and he cast this horse in Venice and had it floated down the canals of Venice before it was ceremoniously shipped off to Chicago to ride on top of this beautiful fountain next to the LaSalle Street Metro station. Congress Expressway rushing by, Ida B. Wells, actually, now they call the Parkway. And again, hardly anyone notices this beautiful piece of art. So, skyscrapers. Chicago is known for its skyscrapers, innumerable numbers of beautiful, tall buildings. What about its sky sprayers? Yes, like the Centennial Fountain. This sky sprayer shoots 2,000 gallons of water a minute across the river. The spray goes 8 stories high. It's really very, very powerful display of water. Here's another sky sprayer, Buckingham Fountain, shooting water 150 feet into the air. And we all love Buckingham Fountain. I don't talk much about it because it's so well known. This is the only image you'll see of that fountain. But there certainly are some incredible stories related to it that are developed in the book. Chicago is known for its stunning architecture. And again, the examples are innumerable. Here we have the, until recently, the Tribune Tower. Now it's a condo building, the Rookery on the right. But what about its architecturally inspired fountains? Yes, many, many of our fountains are really massive pieces of architecture. Here's one example, the Noguchi Fountain, just outside of the School of the Art Institute there on Columbus Avenue. And it features these 2 40-foot long pieces of rainbow granite. The granite, of course, millions of years old. The water, billions of years old. And the steel and glass in the background, hundreds of years old. So what a juxtaposition of different elements there, architecturally gathered. Here's another example. This is the Mist Fountain in the West Loop. Series of 5 arches, and the kids love it. It's a very interactive fountain. You'll find it at Monroe and Sangamon if you're interested in going to see this very unusual modern fountain, something that looks good even in the winter as well as in the summer when the water's running. Another architecturally inspired fountain would be the fountain at the corner of Millennium Park. It's very, very robust, large. The nozzle on the fountain itself mimics the finials on the Wrigley building, which you can barely see in the background. So a lot of architectural elements to this. And of course, it is a replica of the Edward Bennett fountain on that very same spot. This is the peristyle that Bennett put up following Burnham's plans for the lakefront. And this was a glorious piece of architecture put up in 1917. It lasted till 53. It was made of concrete, so by then it started to crumble, and they tore it down and used it as a landfill for Lakeshore Drive. Incredible. So in the construction, the planning of the Millennium Park, they brought it back, and this is a replica, almost an exact duplicate of the earlier architecturally inspired peristyle. And lastly, Chicago is known for its vibrant performing arts. We're so blessed in this city, especially when we get back on track. The ballet, the orchestra, Pritzker Pavilion, etc. But I would maintain that our fountains perform for us also. Our dynamic performing fountains. And during the music interlude, you'll see a short video where these fountains are active and are flowing. With this presentation, we've just got the still images, but you can see that these are performing fountains. This is the spinning fountain, and it's spinning water in all different directions for us. It's down in Hyde Park near the university. Here's another example of the performance nature of a fountain. It almost looks like a stage here with the special lighting and the people seated. It's a very beautiful setting with the emphasis on light and shadows. Here's another performance put on by, in this case, the Fountain of the Great Lakes over by the Art Institute. And stretching the point a little bit, here is a fountain that's going to give us a little performance in a video I'm going to play for you. This is at Lincoln Square, right by the bookseller, an original piece of art. And it's a very bubbly, dynamic, active fountain. And it attracts performers all the time because there's a square right to the east of this fountain. And often you'll find musicians or jugglers or kids being entertained with different storytelling or whatever. And it's a glorious spot. And so another element, another level of performance that this fountain has given us is that it starred in a beer commercial put on for WEINHARD'S beer in Portland. And I think it's very, very ironic that a city like Portland came all the way to Chicago to film a beer commercial. They couldn't get fountains in the city of Portland, no matter how, quote, weird, Portland is proud of being weird. That city would not approve the concept, but Chicago said, yes, bring it on. So for about 5 days, this fountain in Chicago was turned into a set where they filmed this commercial. And I'll play it for you now. And I wonder I'm sure you'll be able to spot the fountain in the commercial. This is kind of fun. Let's see now. There it is. So that's quite a performance. I think you'll agree. So we're going to move ahead with just some of the remarkable fountains that really stand out in my mind, and then I'll end with a fountain story that's pretty telling, powerful story. So some of the more remarkable fountains in Chicago would have to include the Drexel Fountain on the south side. It's remarkable for many reasons, but primarily because it's our oldest existing fountain. Dates all the way back to 1883, and it's remarkable too because up on top is Francis Drexel, the banking scion of the Drexel Bank that eventually morphed into J.P. Morgan Chase. But Francis Drexel never set foot in Chicago. So how do you end up on the top of this statue of this pedestal? That's because Francis Drexel sent his sons out to the pioneer town of hinterland Chicago to run his banking interests here, and they wanted to honor their father with this fountain. Also notice how dainty it is. It's a very Victorian style and design. They didn't recycle water back then, so you'll see here a very low fountain flow because all the water is discharged, discarded. And so that is a very distinctive style. Here's another remarkable fountain, the Columbus Fountain, that used to stand in Little Italy, Loomis and 14th Street. Especially remarkable because this statue of Christopher Columbus was cast in Italy to be the centerpiece of the Italian pavilion at the World's Columbian Exposition of 1893. Yes, this statue harkens all the way back to that World's Fair. And the Italians wanted to make it something very special, so they melted down candelabras and chalices and many precious objects so that this statue would contain some of that sanctity. And then the Pope blessed it, and it was sent off to the World's Fair. At the end of the fair, the statue was installed above the Columbus building in downtown Chicago. That building was torn down in '59, and so the statue then kind of tossed around a bit. Here you see it being used on a parade, escorted by the Knights of Columbus. And then after a few years, it languished and ended up in the junkyard of a lumber company. Well, in 1966, the Italian-American community rescued it and had it installed on this purpose-built fountain. And there it stood gloriously for a very long time. And of course, you know where this story is going. Recently, the statue of Columbus was taken down because of concerns about his history and his legacy. There were two Christopher Columbus statues in Chicago related to the World's Fair of 1893. The other one was part of this fountain downtown Chicago. Here you see it right by a city hall. After a while, it was moved to the far south side. And you see a close-up of Columbus there, looking over the world that he had navigated so successfully. But of course, this statue of Columbus has been removed also, which unfortunately dismantles and renders purposeless and bizarre-looking the fountain itself that used to stand on this pedestal. So, another remarkable fountain is this one. It's called Peaches, and it's right across the street from Gethsemane, the garden center there on Ashland and Clark. And what makes it so special is, unlike Drexel and Columbus and all these other famous male figures, Peaches was a woman, and she was basically an average person. She worked at Gethsemane right across the street for years and was so helpful and so friendly that when she died of diabetes, the alderwoman said, well, let's put up a fountain in her honor. What a novel idea Mary Ann Smith came up with. And so Peaches was built, and this fountain is named after her. I never met her. I guess she was quite a gal, very friendly and very helpful at the fountain center, right up until the time when she was, just serving people out of a wheelchair. Another remarkable fountain is the Gurgoyle Fountain in Wicker Park. When I first saw the name of this, I thought it was a typo, but no, in fact, it's the Gurgoyle Fountain. Put up in 1895, and it does feature gargoyles, but the gargoyles gurgle. And so the artist named it the Gurgoyle Fountain. Here's another remarkable fountain. It was also exhibited at the World's Fair of 1893, a part of the pavilion of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. And the point was to encourage people to drink water instead of gin and beer. And here you see after the fair where the fountain was placed on a city street. And you can see the whole makeup of the fountain. It stood on this massive rock, and it had a trough for horses. But how do you suppose humans were supposed to drink out of this fountain? Did they have to stick their head under that stream of water coming out of the basin in the fountain girl's hands? No, there were cups for them to use. And people would come by, hold the cup in the stream of water, and then take a drink. This was a very common element of fountains back in that period. Here you see another example. The Illinois Humane Society fountains had that same drinking cup setup. And there were 60 of these all over town, put up by the, again, Illinois Humane Society. And they all had these shared cups. The shared cup was not banned in Chicago until, well, all of Illinois until 1911. By that time, they were known as the death cups because the germs that they helped, that were shared by people, not with the horses as much. The cups were way more dangerous than those horses drinking out of the fountains. Finally banned 1911. Now, there are 2 of these little Illinois Humane Society fountains left in Chicago. They were all made of cast iron, so many of them were ripped out and sold as scrap. But there's 2 left, and if you've never noticed them, I can't blame you because they're kind of on obscure, in obscure locations, right at the intersection of, Chicago Avenue and Michigan, right next to the water tower. And tourists, 50 million of them a year, used to go by this intersection, and no one took note of these fountains. The other one's across the street on the other side of the water tower. And they're great, but who appreciates them the most? Not the Chicagoans, not the tourists, but the horses who pull the tourist carriages along the way, and the horses know they got a drink of water coming. As they head back to the starting point for their next run. The horses would just eagerly clomp up to these water fountains for a drink. Here's another remarkable fountain, Sky Space. When I first went by on my bike, I thought, gee, that's like a abandoned water tower or something. And as I started to study fountains, I found out that it is a most remarkable piece of art put up by James Turrell, who's a world-renowned artist. And it features this large silo-looking structure surrounded by this wall of water. So you actually go through the water, through the doors into the space, and then be surrounded by water. And inside you look up, and there's this oval-shaped opening for viewing the skies and the heavens. And Turrell called it an observatory without a telescope. And it's really remarkable, the experience you get by looking up through that space without any buildings or trees or telephone wires or anything, light poles in your way. It's very, very remarkable religious experience. In fact, all of the sky spaces around the country, except for this one, are either in churches or the homes of some very, very wealthy people. And here you see it in the setting. There is an accompanying fountain next to it. At night, the sky space itself lights up in different colors. Beautiful space there at the new South Campus of the University of Illinois. Go check that out. Remarkable. I promise you remarkable fountains. How about this one? This is the Shit Fountain. Yes, S-H-I-T. It sits on this little pedestal with a coil of poop made of bronze and with running water constantly over the bronze. So it always looks like a fresh, glistening deposit. What in the world is this all about? Who would ever think of doing this? Well, his name is Jerzy Konar. He's a Polish-American artist, very, very famous in Chicago for doing liturgical art, crucifixes, seats in churches, baptismal fonts, statues of school kids in front of Catholic schools. Here is his work on Saint Benedict the African. These are the outside doors, and what you see circling around heaven is a parade of people. These are people working their way to heaven. At Jerzy Konar's home and studio, you see more of this kind of religious art. There's this angel carved in wood on the corner and caged just so it won't get stolen. But right there at his home and studio is right where he built the shit fountain. And he did it because his neighbors were not picking up after their dog. So he wanted to really teach them a lesson and said, in your face, people. And so he has a good sense of humor, we'll put it that way. He calls this fountain a pile of crap. I call it Kennard's #2 fountain. And for a couple of reasons. One's obvious. The other is that his #1 fountain, the first fountain he ever made, is the Black History Fountain on the south side, which is designed to inspire the African-American community. The balls here on one side have the names of famous Black American people, Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Mahalia Jackson, etc. And the water flows off of these balls and mixes with the water from the Black community, and one is inspiring the other. Beautiful, beautiful space. Jersey Kennard. All right, so here's the little story I want to end with. It's a story about the children's fountain built at Heald Square, which used to be a big traffic island at Wacker and Wabash. Put up in 1982, and here's another shot of it, so you can see it right next to the Wrigley Building. And it was put up by Jane Byrne. And she loved this fountain so much that she put it on the cover of her book. You see My Chicago, and you see that same fountain in the background. In the book, she calls it her favorite project, a work of the heart. One of the two achievements that mean the most to me. Well, saying that was just like putting a target on it, because Mayor Daley came along and ripped it out. Well, he had an excuse. They were redoing Wacker Drive in 2005. No, I'm sorry, in 2000. And after the work was quickly done, the fountain went missing and no one could relocate it, or no one had any plans to replace it in the landscaping of this space. Plenty of room for it. Daley specifically wanted it out of there. So that was a terrible thing, and it took a hue and cry from Byrne and fountain lovers and some journalists and Byrne's family, etc., to get this replaced, to get this reinstalled, not here, but on pretty much more neutral ground. The Chicago History Museum agreed to take the chance of aggravating Mayor Daley by allowing it to be installed here next to its museum. So what a statement to make, especially when you consider that this was the children's fountain, that Byrne wanted to inspire kids to do better. Well, Daley took a different approach. So with that, I would encourage everyone to, in a youthful way, to go out and have fun with fountains. Here, of course, is the most fun fountain in the world, the Crown Fountain. And go and check out these fountains. And I guess with that, I'll turn it back over. Well, let me just mention one more thing. We're so fortunate to have this fountain in Chicago with these two towers and the water pool between them. The other 2 of 3 finalists included a slow, flat fountain designed by Maya Lin, who did the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fountain in Washington, D.C. Would have been very quiet and respectful, but standoffish. The other was a tower 150 feet tall, 3 times as high as this one. And that was designed by Robert Venturi, famous for his love and design work in Vegas. So it was a Vegas-style fountain. Guess what? It would have had no water at all. It would have been a giant billboard just running 24/7, just no interaction, no water of any kind. So we're very fortunate to have this fountain. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg, for such a lovely and informative presentation. Greg has provided a free copy of his color map of 40 Chicago fountains to anyone who would like one. The map will help get everyone out to discover our fabulous fountains here in Chicago. There's a link on the program page today for today's program that has a copy of that. As well, on the same page, you can find a link to buy a copy of his book. There's a direct link. You can buy it directly from the SIU website. You could also email Greg, and he will send you a signed copy directly to you. Next, we are going to show for our musical interlude a video trailer that Greg mentioned that shows a couple of dozen fountains at work. The Q&A period will follow, and viewers should be thinking about their questions and entering them in the chat box. Contributions will be collected during the musical interlude. They'll be collected virtually at the following website address: ethicalhumanistSociety.org/donate, where you can use either a credit card or PayPal, or you can use the Zelle app. That's Zelle, Z-E-L-L-E, at donate@ethicalhuman.org. It is through our generosity that we show how meaningful the Sunday morning programs are. The suggested donation is $5. However, any amount that one is comfortable with is greatly appreciated. We appreciate all those who help sustain the society with their donations of time and money. Okay, well, now the chat box is open for questions, so please take a moment to add your questions to the comment section, and we can ask Greg and get his opinion on those. Oh, sorry, I just saw these questions. I was on the wrong page. Let's see. Okay, first question, Greg. Where exactly is the link? Okay, we'll provide the link to download and receive a copy of the map. It could be probably put it as a banner ad across the video, or you can look at the ethicalhumanistsociety.org page for today's notice. Okay, so let's see. First question, are there any other fountains in Chicago that people can actually play in, swim in, besides the Millennium Park video fountain?
That is a great question. Let's see now. The best one, there are several, the best one would be out by Navy Pier. So just to the west of Navy Pier at the entrance is a very, very interactive, playful fountain where water shoots up on you unexpectedly, and just a wonderful place for kids of any age to play. The fountain in Daly Plaza is known as a spot where people often will go and take their shoes and socks off and cool off, splash each other a little bit. It's probably not officially encouraged, but that certainly has been has happened quite a bit. Storks at Play in Lincoln Park. It's not encouraged, but I've seen kids playing in that fountain a lot. It's over by the conservatory. It's not as popular or allowed or as encouraged in Chicago as elsewhere. Kansas City, Missouri is actually Fountain City, USA. More fountains per capita there than anywhere else, and they make a big deal out of their fountains. They have a lot of fountains that kids and adults, anyone can play in. I wish we did more of that in Chicago.
Okay, thank you. Next question. It reads, nice presentation. Please give background info on the fountain at U of I. I believe it's named for Saint Langdon Neal, a very prominent Black attorney.
Yes, it's the square is named after Neal, not the fountain. I'm looking. That is just a question that's stretching my memory a little bit. The fountain is called Sky Space, and the square is named after Neal, who was an attorney. I believe he helped the university to raise funds and then to expand into this part of Chicago, expand its campus. So that's the Earl Neal Plaza, where you'll find Sky Space and the accompanying fountain down at ground level. Yes. And he was African American, very, very accomplished individual.
Great. So next question, why do they turn off the fountains for COVID?
Good question. I'm very disappointed to see that happening because they're outdoors, all the ones we've looked at, and they generally don't gather more than 50 people at a time. They often can gather or attract 5 people or passersby, so I see no danger at all in letting them continue to run. So it may just be a cost-saving measure on the part of the city. There are a few fountains that have continued to run. There's one in front of the Chase Bank, Exelon Plaza, and that's a private fountain. Harris Bank Fountain, Northern Trust Bank Fountain. A lot of the private fountains continued to run and even run now in the fall. And yet the city has shut down others that have been completely safe. Even if Buckingham attracts 50 people, they're spread out and there's a breeze always on the lakefront, no danger whatsoever. So I'm disappointed in the city and the parks, Chicago Park District, for universally shutting down those government-owned and controlled fountains.
And that leads to our next series of questions. A couple of people asked how much these fountains cost to install, and are they expensive to maintain?
Yes, depending on the design of the fountain, can be quite expensive or pretty reasonable. There is a fountain just off of Wells Street at Burton Place. It amounts pretty much to a concrete bathtub with a kind of a thing that looks like a shower head just spraying water up from the middle. That would have been extremely inexpensive. $20,000. You're taking a wild guess. I don't know the numbers. A more elaborate fountain, especially if you've got an artist who's commissioned, you're talking $1 million. Crown, I think I remember 17 million for the Crown fountain. Don't hold me to that number. I can check it as we are speaking, but that's one of the most elaborate, complicated, innovative fountains in the world. And so that would be your high end at, yeah, 17 million, I believe, is the cost there. To maintain them, yes, there is an expense, especially in Chicago with tough weather conditions, not only winters, but salt everywhere that can get into the plumbing of some of these fountains and corrode the pipes and the mechanisms. I hope that answers your questions. There are several dollar figures per fountain throughout the book, and it varies tremendously, again, from that little bathtub on Wells Street to the spectacular Crown fountain.
So the salt comment leads to attention to the next question. The question is, birds probably love fountains. Are there wires or devices to keep them and their deposits away?
That's an interesting question. Before answering, I will just confirm that the Crown fountain budgeted, cost 17 million. I just looked up the number. Birds and fountains, I've never seen any devices to distract birds from coming in. It's a good question because you'd think they'd be drawn to the fountains for a drink of water, but I've never seen any kind of devices or barriers. You see those all over on buildings and on the L platforms and things like that, but I've never seen that with a fountain. And I've visited all these fountains, some of them dozens of times, and I've never seen birds taking over a fountain. I've never seen birds turning one of these into a bird bath. Maybe they're just too big and wet. Some of them.
Okay, thank you. Next question, has anything been done or planned to restore the Laredo Taft Fountain of Time after its sustained wear over the years?
So much has been done to repair and maintain that fountain over the years. There have been innumerable campaigns and expenditures to try and preserve that fountain, but it is, I believe, a losing battle. Literally millions of dollars have been invested in a series of restorations, and it's just too tough. Part of the problem is the design of the fountain. It is not solid concrete. It is simply a concrete shell that's molded over forms, and then scores of these different molded pieces are bolted together, and inside is hollow, and inside is full of all kinds of metalwork and bolts and a lot of humidity, which is hurting the fountain from the underside. Some of the work done on that fountain has actually been counterproductive. Believe it or not, they have sandblasted it, and what is that going to do to a thin layer of concrete? It's taken away much of the detail of the artistic features of that fountain. So whether it can be saved or not is a tough question. I have spoken on the support of the idea of putting a cover over it. I can't see it being lifted up and moved into a museum. That's too much of a big project, and what museum would have the space for it? But I think it should be covered. And if that sounds horrendous, think about the fact that the Chagall has downtown Chicago on Dearborn there at the Exelon Plaza has been covered as well. There's a beautiful, beautiful mosaic, as you know, by Chagall, subject to deterioration and subject to the elements, nicely covered in a very discreet way, and has helped to preserve that. I think they should do the same thing to the Fountain of Time, and it would buy some time, but eventually, I don't know what is going to have to be done. 20, 30, 40 years from now, it could well be disintegrated, parts of it disintegrated.
That's sad to hear. Next question. Are there open processes for input as new public fountains are proposed, designed, and installed for decommissioning them regarding health, public cups, like you mentioned, safety, or historical reasons like Columbus?
I know of no central place for comments or public participation. This being Chicago, the best way to have any impact would be through your alderman or alderwoman. There is no central place for management of the fountains, even the ones that are public. They are maintained and under the supervision of Park District, Department of Water, Streets and Sand, the city itself, and other government entities. So it's very diverse group of entities that are in charge of these fountains, and so there's a lot of miscommunication and lack of coordination, really, for your public fountains. I know of no projects to add fountains. There's no committee or there's no ongoing project. It just takes a big push. The last big push was 97, 98, 99. Mayor Daley decided to install fountains. First off, he said 1 in every ward, and there were all kinds of plans, grandiose ideas, and 25 fountains were installed under that program, including the one that we saw in Lincoln Square that's so beautiful. So that was a kudos to Daley for that. But since then, there's never been a push, oh, we need fountains, and let's get out there and design them and find places for them. No push. Very, very rarely is a new fountain installed. The last one I can remember is the Polk Brothers fountain to the west at the entrance of Navy Pier. And that goes back, I think now 2 years that was put in and was paid for by the Polk Brothers because they got naming rights to the park, the very, very small park where that fountain is located.
Next question. Is there any new proposed fountains we should be excited about?
I wish there were, and that's a good follow-up to the previous question. I know of no fountains that are proposed or in the works or planned.
Okay, so we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. I don't see any new ones coming up, but I'm going to ask you a question. What is your favorite fountain? And maybe like a follow-up or a later one. Like, are there some out-of-the-way ones that we should take into consideration that aren't super popular that we should take the trek out to witness?
Yeah. My favorite fountain it's just, that's such a great but impossible question. So I'm just going to say my favorite fountain is the one I'm sitting next to at any given moment. So it could be Buckingham, it could be Fountain of Time. Honestly, whatever, if there's water running and I get the sound and the splashing and the calming effect of a fountain, I'm happy as can be. And that may sound odd, but if you look at the cover of my book, it's a photograph of a fountain at Northern Trust on Monroe Street. And it's 4 little sprays of water that are only about, 16 inches off the ground. And it is not at all a spectacular fountain. It's not the Crown Fountain or Buckingham. It's a little low, just sprinkling of water. And yet the photographer, Julia Teal, did such a nice job bringing that to life and making it look majestic that it kind of underscores my point that any fountain can be really powerful and majestic. Because that, if you go by that, you'll probably walk past it without noticing it the first time. And then once you get to know it and sit by it, you'll appreciate it. But look how wonderful it looks on the cover of the book, even though it's very lowly. I would say that the Fountain of the Great Lakes is especially inspiring. It's to the south of the entrance of Art Institute, right on Michigan Avenue. Not well known despite its great central location. And it features 5 damsels, maidens who hold big shells, and water flows from one shell to the other in the same pattern that you have with the Great Lakes. You have Lake Superior, Michigan, Huron, and all the way down through to Lake Ontario. And so it speaks to the importance and beauty of the Great Lakes, and it's a beautiful fountain. I would encourage everyone to go to that fountain. That will give you fountain fever right there off the bat. And it's not an obscure, distant fountain, which was your second question, but it is one that is not very well known or appreciated, even though it's centrally located. In terms of a far out distant one, I don't know. I'm just paging through some photos here.
Well, there's some other questions we can talk to while you think through that. Have you noticed a place that says we need a fountain here?
Yes, I tend to see the world through that type of a lens, so I see that many places. To be specific, I'd have to think about it, but yes, there are spots. Anyone who's been to Rome or Paris, you know, you turn a corner and there's a fountain, and you want to just sit and listen and have a cup of coffee and read a book or something. There are spots like that all over Chicago, in all of our parks, in many of the concrete plazas that we have that are so large and forbidding and cold. Put a fountain in there, and it would liven things up.
Okay, the next question is a little bit of an unfair question. The question is, what is your least favorite fountain?
Oh, okay, the one that's dismantled, broken down, and not repaired. Be it now we have this Columbus fountain in Little Italy that used to be. I'm not speaking about the importance or value of Columbus and his works, but that was a glorious spot. And now what we have is a chain link fence around a slab of concrete. That bothers me. It's let's get someone else in there. So I don't like fountains that are broken down or not functioning. My least favorite fountain, I already mentioned, the one on Wells Street at Wells and Burton. And it was actually supposed to be quite a glorious, innovative, custom-made fountain, but the architect and the community could not agree on the design. And so the architect threw up his hands and installed this concrete bathtub with just a squirt of water shooting out of the middle of it upward, and said, "Fine, I'm done. I'm out of here. Here's your fountain." And so it was purposefully meant to more or less be a placeholder, if not an insult to the community, for being difficult to work with. And unfortunately, it was never improved upon, or they didn't get another architect to come in and do something nice. So here we are, I don't know, 15 years later, and we still have that crummy little junky looking thing, which is disgraceful, especially when you think that Wells Street is a very attractive and you could say well-to-do place. A lot of money there, a lot of nice streetscaping been done, and yet that fountain has been allowed to be an embarrassment.
Okay. Next question. Are kids still putting bubble bath in fountains?
Oh, yes, they are, and that is a real problem. It's more college kids, pranksters, than little kids. And when they throw the bubble bath in there, it mucks up the works. It hurts the pumps and the controls of fountains, because many of the fountains, you know, have chlorine and other chemicals added to make the water safe. Recycling requires extra mechanisms, and so the bubbles and the soap gets in there and wreaks havoc. So it forces the owner of the fountain to shut down the water and often do repairs or inspections. Royal pain, and just for the joy of seeing some bubbles, I think the water bubbling is enough.
Thank you. Okay, last question. Do you have any plans for other books about Chicago coming up?
Oh, yeah, well, thanks for asking. I'm working on my next book, which is a history lover's guide to Chicago. So this is not going to tell you where to get good pizza or how to get, you know, into some discotheque with a special password or anything. This is going to be a guidebook with a focus on historical sites and historical aspects of the city. And so it'll be more of a prose book than a guidebook with, you know, phone numbers and addresses. It'll be a discussion of the history of Chicago and what's still there, what you can go and see and do and touch as it relates to history, as opposed to just history that happened in the past and is now gone. So, you know, for example, the Battle of Fort Dearborn. You know, we don't talk a lot about the battle, but we talk about the location where you can go to this day and see the plaque and stand in the site and learn about the statue that used to be on display near that site and what the statue said about the different parties involved, etc. So his discussion of historical questions and locations throughout the city. That'll be out in about a year and a half.
That's great. Look forward to it. So thank you for answering all of those questions. We do have a virtual coffee hour that follows today's talk, and I'm hoping you have a few minutes to spare if some others have further questions they want to ask you about fountains or any of your other books that you wrote. They're all sound really, really fascinating. Sure. So I'm going to go ahead now and just read some society announcements, if that's okay, and then we'll kick off the coffee hour. Following the program today, we'll have a virtual coffee hour. Bring your own coffee or snacks and join us for an open Zoom chat. Click on the link in the comments section or go to ethicalhumanistsociety.org/coffee hour. Our film discussion group will meet again on Tuesday, October 13th at 7:15 p.m. to discuss Atlantics and The Social Dilemma, now available on Netflix. For more information or to join the discussion, send an email to office@ethicalhuman.org. Newcomers are welcome. Our Sunday school will continue to meet virtually this fall, every other Sunday. The next meeting will be next Sunday, October 25th at 10:30 a.m. If you'd like to join in for virtual discussions, games, crafts, and more, contact Sharon Applequist at sundayschool@ethicalhuman.org. New families are welcome. Next Sunday, October 18th, Dan Applequist, co-chair of the Worldwide Consortium Technical Architecture Group, will present This is for Everyone, Ethical Principles for Building the Web. Dan will tell us about his group's recent efforts to develop a set of ethical principles for the web. He will describe their guiding ideals, including how the internet should be pro-social and open to all people, regardless of geographic boundaries. He will discuss how the web should support healthy debate and freedom of expression utilizing verifiable data. And he will explain how the web's architecture should be transparent, environmentally sustainable, and above all, user-friendly. On Sunday, October 25th, Harriet DeWitt will present Tripping Hard for Science. Dr. DeWitt, who runs the Human Behavioral Pharmacology Lab at the University of Chicago, will tell us about administering drugs like alcohol, caffeine, cannabis, LSD, ecstasy, and psilocybin to volunteers in an effort to learn more about human biology and the nervous system. She will share what it's like to give people hallucinogenic drugs and then study what happens. She'll also outline her research on therapeutic uses for hallucinogenics and why researchers are feeling cautiously optimistic that when used under controlled circumstances, these substances might have potential benefits. For more details on these or any of our other activities, see our website at ethicalhumanistsociety.org. Connect with us on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for videos of past speakers and future streaming programs. So we encourage viewers to join us via Zoom for our virtual coffee hour. The link information will be provided. I will close out today's program by reading a short poem. I'll begin. Into the sunshine, full of the light, leaping and flashing from morn till night, into the moonlight, whiter than snow, waving so flower-like when the winds blow, into the starlight, rushing in spray, happy at midnight, happy by day, ever in motion, blithesome and cheery, still climbing heavenward, never a-weary, glad of all weathers, still seeming best, upward or downward motion thy rest, full of a nature nothing can tame, changed every moment, ever the same, ceaseless aspiring, ceaseless content, darkness or sunshine thy element, glorious fountain, let my heart be fresh, changeful, constant, upward like thee. And that is The Fountain by James Russell Lowell. Thanks everyone for coming, and thanks again, Greg, for a wonderful presentation.